85th birthday was March 8th. I left here on the 5th and flew to Santiago, Chile, there for a couple of days, then flew to Easter Island, or as it is more well known as Rapa Nui, which is the word that the native people use to describe their island. But after arriving on Easter Island, this was the first moai that we spotted. This guy is at least 13 feet tall and weighed 37 tons.
Wow.
Uh,
Cheers.
Interesting fact about the moai is that when they were discovered, not one of them was standing. They had all been tipped over and broken into pieces
Oh,
along the way. This was the first one was spotted. They stand on a platform called an ahu. They are called Moai. Okay, the first white people to see the island saw it on Easter Sunday in 1500s. And they saw the island on Easter Sunday, so they named it Easter Island.
Easter
And that
Island.
was a group of Dutch people, and they stayed on the island for about 5 or 6 hours and went on after that. They determined that it was not suitable for European living in that very short period of time. And so they just went on to other places, but they did make lots of notes about it in their books. And we'll talk about some of those as we move on. But that was the source of the name, Easter Island. It is more well known as Rapa Nui. Uh, Further on during the trip, we saw this. It's a 24-ton moai and it is the only moai on the island that still has eyes showing. And of course, it has the red scorso top knot on its head. There's a couple of things to say about that, and that is that most moai, or none of the other moai, still have eyes. The story of the moai is that they are reproductions or they are representations of a previous king on the island or a previous leader. When a good leader has died who has provided prosperity to the island, the people will create a stone monument for him and set it up on a platform, as you see here. Uh, and they do that so that his spirit can come back in off the water. A dead person's spirit goes back to the water when he dies on Rapa Nui. So they knew that they wanted this leader to come back and see them. So they built this stone statue. And when they want him to come back, they put the eyes in. And that's a signal for him out there on the water to return. There are over 1,000 of them.
Wow.
Not all of them are standing, but they're counted over 1,000 of them. Are carved out of the basalt rock left from the volcano some 13, 14 billion years ago, whenever the last volcano erupted. And so this is carved out of the spewing of basalt and other rock formations from that volcano that formed the island, and actually much of the island in the Pacific are caused from volcanoes. All of them are volcanic islands. So the eyes are only put in there when they want the spirit to come back from the water to come help them again with some problem, or to make the weather right, or to get the crops to be fruitful, or to bring pregnancy to the right women. And whenever there's a need, they put the eye back in there. But the interesting point that I want to get to next is this top knot, this piece on the head. Only a few of the moai have top knots, have this red scorial top knot. It's made also from material left over from the volcano, but in a totally different place on the island. And I didn't mention it before, but this is a small piece of land. Can you imagine? And maybe you can't conceive this. I had a hard time of thinking how big is 63 square miles. And that's the size of this island, and it's basically too small to support much of a population. The island is, as I said, 64 square miles. It's a triangular shaped island. Each of the ends of the triangle are leftovers from the volcano. Each end of the triangle was formed by a volcano that has all flowed together. On the north side of the island, we get to Anaconda Beach, and this is the sign welcoming us to the national park. Almost 80% of the island is considered national park. Uh, National Park is Easter Islands National Park, but it is also a park for the country of, what's the country name? Who can help me here? Who knows where this is?
Chile? Chile?
Yes, sir. Yes, Easter Island is claimed by Chile from the late 1800s. There was a whole period of time when Europeans were claiming all the islands in the Pacific. The French Polynesia that you know about, the British were there, Spanish people were looking for more land to claim. The United States was looking for land to claim. They ended up claiming Hawaii. Chile got Easter Island. So this is part of the Chilean National Park System. And by the way, Chile's a great spot to visit too. I'd only had a couple of days there. I'd go back again. This is a park on the beach. Huge lawn. By the way, these are replacement trees. When the Europeans arrived, Easter Island had no trees left. It had been a virgin forest of huge trees when the first Polynesians got there. We could talk about what happened to the trees, but they were all gone when the Dutch found the island in the late 1500s. This was a beautiful spot. All of us who were here had the opportunity to go wading or swimming in the ocean, which is on the left in the background. If you look halfway down the island, you'll see some moai standing in a row.
Right.
We're going to take another look at them later on. It's rumored that this is where the Polynesian people who came to Easter Island first landed, and it's a beautiful spot. I think it's probably true that this is where the kings or the leaders of the people would want to live.
When the Dutch got there in the 1500s, was anyone still living on the island at that time?
Oh, yes. And they're living there today. Story is, best guess is they got there sometime between the 400s and the 600s AD. In other words, this has no prehistoric people ever been on the island. It's so isolated and hard to get to that unless you knew how to navigate with the stars and had the ability to navigate the ocean, you wouldn't have gotten there. And it took the Polynesians, by the way, the Polynesians, of course, everybody supposedly came out of Africa. They made their way over to China. And then Polynesians were the people who left the coasts of China some hundreds of thousands of years ago. They had developed a means of transportation across the ocean by hooking side by side two boats and putting a platform between them. We call that a pontoon boats today. And they made these boats in such a way that they could accommodate numerous people, animals, plants, food, water stored in the hollowed out tubes of bamboo plants. And they became experts at touring the Pacific Islands. And as you probably know, they pollinated the various islands as they moved eastward across the Pacific. They got to Easter Island. Nobody knows for sure, and it's hard to tell from the remains. Some people say as early as the 400 ADs, and some say 600 ADs. They're still trying to resolve that.
Hmm.
But from that point forward, there have been people living on Easter Island until today. And today, there's still, well, there's no one left on the island who is a pure 100% descendant of the original islanders. They've been diluted by all of the people who have come and tried to conquer and own the land. But there are descendants. And as a matter of fact, unless you can prove that you are a descendant of one of the original, back off. They did a survey in the 1800s and identified all the people on the island who were not imports, not from Dutch Indies, not from France, not from anywhere else. And they have this book that identifies those families. So unless you can prove you are a descendant of one of those families, you can't buy any property on Easter Island. You can't live there for more than 30 days at a time, with the only exception being that you marry someone who is a proven descendant of one of the original families.
And what is the population? Do you have?
Today, it's about 10,000 people.
Oh.
Half of them are probably Chilean or tourists. So think about maybe $4,000 to $5,000 residents of the island who are authentic. We saw that little group of Moai in the back there on the island. Here's a picture of them as they overlook the beach. These are very, very special because they are so well preserved. By being preserved, I mean they were found laying face forward in the sand. All of the moai that were originally constructed were damaged and laying in the sand when archaeologists came to put things back together. These four have the top hats. Story of top hats is that as time went on and the importance of the moai became more prevalent, the builders of the moai tried to improve their height. And so they put these things on top. There's been a lot of discussion about what that represents. The current belief is that they represent the hair of the person who the moai represents, wrapped around and tied into a top knot. And this is where when they rebuilt this area, the archaeologists discovered coral fragments. So it is believed, as you asked earlier, Marianne, what are they made of? They found coral fragments in the sand, and they were able to piece a few of them together to know that they would fit in an eye socket. And that's where the eyes came from. This is the most well-preserved top knots on the island. On the island, there is one moai known to represent a female. These are men. Interesting thing about this group of moai is that their backs are also covered, and you'll see that in the next slide. because they were buried in the sand when they were tipped over, their backs also got saved. And I don't suppose that doesn't seem to be true of the other standing moai. But you can notice the carvings on their backs. And that is regarded as an indication that all of the moai probably had back carvings before they were damaged.
Why were the Maoris tipped over? What happened to them?
Oh, wow. What a great question.
Earthquake.
Yeah, very quick answer. Well, the Moai represented an ancestor who had brought them good luck, good crops, good wives, good children. When things changed and they weren't having good crops and they weren't having good wives and they were having lots of trouble, the Rapa Nui gave up on their ancestors. They looked for other gods. They looked for something different. They invented a whole new religion, a whole new culture based on fertility, based on me being better than the other. And they formed tribes and groups, and they warred, and they decided to take on their neighbor by destroying his monuments to his ancestors.
Right.
And so they ended up having real battles of fighting and knocked over the Moai and invented a whole new culture, which is called the Birdman culture, which we're going to get to in just a bit. But yeah, it was a terrible time. The Moai culture didn't last forever, and it was only later when us Westerners got involved and dug them out of the sand and reset them back up. But that was the reason, warring. But here's where they came from, out of the quarries. All the Moai were carved on their backs. And you can see one right in the bottom, in the middle of this picture. This guy would have been, had he been finished. And when that warring started, everything stopped. I mean, the carving stopped, the Moai got tipped over, everything changed on the island. But had this guy been finished, he would have been 67 feet high, which is almost twice as high as anything on the island today. You could see he's on his back. When they finished carving his body out, he would be on his back on a fine rib of rock that they would manage to chip out by putting boulder or logs underneath him and so on until he was released from the rocks, and then they would lower the Moai down a ramp to stand upright, and that's when they would be able to carve the backs. Here, what the story is that once they got this guy carved, they would put logs underneath it, lots of ropes, lots of people, lots of power. They would pull him out of the quarry onto a roadway down the hill that had a pit at the bottom, and with the ropes made out of the plant life on the island, they would slowly let the Moai down the hill into this spot where when the bottom hit it, it would drop down into the hole and the Moai would stand. From that point, one theory is, and this has been proven possible, with ropes, they walk the Moai down the roadway to its standing place. The other thought is that they rolled it on logs the entire distance to where it was supposed to go, and then dug a hole and stood it up and raised it with stones and logs and manpower to an upright position on the platform where it stood. Yeah, it's a mystery,
Right.
and there are theories. After carving, looked at the last line here, after carving, the moai were chipped out of the mountain and lowered down a ramp to stand upright where carving could be completed. And that would have happened before they took them to the site.
Hmm.
Now, I said there are over 1,000 moai on the island. Two-thirds of them are buried, or two-thirds of the size is buried. They've dug around some of these and found out that there's a whole body underground. Uh, there, there's 1,000. There must be 600 of them are still buried on the island, like this. And each face represents a particular ancestor from the past. Want to see 15 moai in a row? 15 statues. They're from 18 to 37 feet tall. It was an amazing sunrise to watch. About each moai representing a leader of this particular clan. And 2 lifetimes, 3 lifetimes, 15 lifetimes of leadership represented here by this particular clan. Now, here's a question I might ask you. Where did they get the resources? What resources would it take to build these statues? You're living on this island with your friends and neighbors and your enemies. Well, they didn't have enemies when they were building the statues. They were all pretty happy with each other. What did they have to do here? They had to eat, of course. They had to eat and they had to reproduce. There was nothing else for them to do. There was no Home Depot to go to. There was no McDonald's. So they decided somehow to build statues of their ancestors with their excess energy. Our guide said, now this is interesting. We talked briefly about their ability to travel the oceans coming from the islands, and so forth. There was a theory and a whole book written about the belief that Easter Islanders were really descendants of South America. Like they had come over from a boat in Peru to Easter Island, and all these Easter Islanders were Peruvians. Not true. Genetically, there's not a trace of South America in the ancestors of the Easter Islanders. They are Polynesian. But in the 1200s, that's when we saw an explosion in the building of good moai. So I asked our guide, why? It's theorized that it was in the 1200s that the Polynesians made a trip to South America, maybe 17, maybe 100, who knows how many. But they came back to Polynesia with the sweet potato. The sweet potato is full of energy. And according to this particular that we had, it was the excess energy that provided the impetus to build more moai and build them faster and more furiously. It's kind of like the theory of, oh boy, I forgot the name. You can't have art and you can't have music and you can't have fun until you have enough energy left over from producing your food and your reproductive.
Maslow's needs.
Who was it?
Maslow's needs.
Yes, the Maslow theory. Went to work at the 1200s when they got the sweet potato. All right. Where did it all come from? It came from the volcanoes This is the remains of a major crater lake eruption many years ago, and this is what's inside of it. There are three of them, which provided water to the early folks and just a magnificent, beautiful view. Down there, it's a bog,
Oh, it's a bog, okay.
and it's filled with
There it says
native
right there.
plants, reeds, flowers, taro root, things that have gotten here from the birds that flew from other places. Remember, this was a volcanic island that erupted millions of years ago, and there's nothing here but ash left from the volcano. What rainfall fell from the skies and filled these places up. And then what happened? Well, who knows? It took millions of years, but birds came by and dropped seeds. And it wasn't until the 1600s, 1400s that any people ever showed up. So this is the bottom of that volcano, and the hillsides around it that are populated by plants that came from birds millions of years ago. On the rim of that volcano, now we're getting back to what happened to the Maui and why did they get tipped over? These are the remains of a village that was built on the rim of the volcano at the top of the cliff that dropped 1,000 feet into the bottom below. It's the site of the Birdman Festival, which is what happened at the time they gave up on their ancestors and tried to find another belief that would take care of them on the island. This was fun. The only sign of wildlife I ever saw on the island.
That's it, huh?
Just point out that these structures, 40 of them have been reconstructed, have this entranceway in the bottom. And that's where people went when they wanted to rest. Now, why were they there and why did they want to rest? They were there because they were there for the Birdman Festival. The Birdman Festival was designed to help eliminate competition on the island and the cruelty that was going on as a result of the competition and the tipping of the Maui. And so each family on the island, the king of the family would appoint himself or a younger man to compete in the Birdman Festival. During the competition, which was about a month long in, say, maybe May of the year, before the winter spirits set in, they would all come up here for a month long and hang out, and these were the places they stayed during the Birdman competition. This was occupied only for 1 month of the year, and it was during this competition. There's this island offshore. It was part of the Birdman competition, and competitors would swim from the top of the mountain where those houses were, from the top of the mountain over the edge, climb down 1,000 feet, jump into the water, and swim to the island. When they got to the island, they would wait until one of the competitors, that is a representative from all the families who were competing, would get the sooty tern's first egg. Now, the sooty tern is a special bird. It would come to Easter Island in the spring to lay its eggs and raise its children. It would then fly away and wouldn't be back for another year. So it led to the fertility cult of Easter Island, which was included in the Birdman competition. So we got all these young men representing all the families on the island. We go climb down the mountain and swim to the island and find an egg. When they found the egg, they would put it in a pouch they had built on their forehead and swim back and deliver it to the leader. That's the Birdman competition. That leader then was anointed as the leader for a year, which meant that anything he wanted, he got for 1 year, only 1 year. And then there was another Birdman competition. Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Just to show you, here's a drawing on a rock up there. This is a picture of somebody's view of the Birdman. And just threw that in there for fun. There are a lot of drawings around the rocks around the island on the bases of the Maui and there are caves out here, lots of caves that they used to live in. Now, let's talk about today a bit. I already said you can't live there unless you can trace your roots or are married to one of them. The lady in the middle is the owner of this restaurant where we were, and these are her cousins and her friends. They're just really wonderful people, well educated. Many of them have gone off the island to go to college on the continent. But anyway, here are three of the locals playing for us. They're just really wonderful people, I'd say. There's tourism and archaeology. What I think you probably consider that a very small part. They manufacture nothing to give away, to sell, to give away. They have no great fish food industry. They don't have cattle. They don't. No, this is a tourist time.
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to tell you that it started in the 60s. We got to go to a ceremonial dance. This was an hour of physical activity by men and women, totally an hour of activity. Only thing I might add to that is because
That's
this is tourism is their main industry, as you was just pointed out by Fran, I think. This is a curse to the island because tourism is just changing their way of life, changing everything. Had you gone back in the 60s, none of this was possible. Nobody came in the 60s. They weren't even known about in the 60s except from the Dutch visitors
really.
and the books that had been written by the few that had showed up. In the 60s, things started to change. One of the changes came from Robert McNamara, who you may remember was the Secretary of Defense under John Kennedy.
Right.
He was worried about the French colonizing French Polynesia and the fact that the French were testing the atomic bomb by blowing up places on the island area of French Polynesia. So he arranged to have a group of Americans go to Easter Island and built a place there to monitor French activity in the Pacific. So started in the 60s, the interest in Easter Island began with us, the Americans. They built a primitive airport, a primitive runway that would handle the kinds of planes at that time that could bring a few people and instruments in at a time. And since the 60s, that airport now takes the largest airplane that can land on a runway. And that's the one that brings in all these people every day. But in the 60s, also, archaeology got really interested.
And like glasses,
Well, I don't have a slide on this.
fish.
An American archaeologist, interestingly, he was a member of the Apache Indian tribe that did the code breaking during World War II.
It's
He
Navajos.
was, he was interested in his own people and where they came from. He'd gone to college and studied archaeology and decided to take a trip down to Easter Island, and he became involved in the reconstruction of all the moai that are standing now. I don't know where his funding came from or how it all worked out, but all those moai that had been broken and buried in the sand that are standing today are because of American coming down there in the 60s and getting interested in making things happen. So today that runway is used exclusively to bring in these great big aircraft. They either bring in people or they bring in supplies. We talk about, gee whiz, it must be expensive to live there because they have to bring in all the supplies. Well, think about where our supplies come from. They all come on a truck. Easter Island, they come on a plane. Not all of them. This gentleman has got fish for sale. This is on the street in Rapa Nui on Main Street, in fact. Here's the meat they got for sale.
Yeah.
Cutting it up with a DeWalt's key saw. When Chile took over Easter Island back in the 1800s, they decided this place ought to pay for itself. So they sold the rights to a sheep herder from Australia who brought a breeding herd of sheep to the island. He brought in 600 sheep. These were those fancy ones that raised a nice wool. And so there was a herd of sheep on the island all that period of time until the 60s. So there are a few sheep running around. Most of them have all been eliminated. It's all gone now. This contract is expired. So they do have some sheep, and they have horses on the island, and there are a few cows. All right, on Sunday we went to Mass. This is a great preacher, a priest, said Mass in Spanish, which Joy Houston, my person who came with me, could translate and who told me what was going on. Of course, I could tell, I personally could tell based on the practices, but it was a solemn mass. The Rapa Nui people are Catholic, or quite possibly they have turned away from religion totally.